Rachel Morgan had always known she was meant to fly. At 24, she stood at the top of her class at Skyward Aviation Academy, her theory scores breaking records that had stood for a decade. While other cadets struggled with basic flight patterns, Rachel executed complex maneuvers with the precision of a veteran pilot who'd logged thousands of hours. Her roommate Jessica would often find her at 3 a.m., hunched over flight manuals and weather charts, memorizing emergency procedures. That wouldn't be taught until senior year. "You're going to burn yourself out," Jessica warned, but Rachel just smiled. She wasn't studying hard. She was preparing for her destiny. The academy buzzed with talk about Rachel's future. Instructors whispered that major airlines were already asking about her graduation date. Captain Williams, her primary flight instructor, seemed less enthusiastic about her success than others, often assigning her extra duties while praising mediocre performances from other students. Something in his bloodshot eyes made Rachel uncomfortable, but she pushed the feeling aside. Maybe he was just pushing her harder because he saw her potential. During a routine field assessment on a crisp October morning, Rachel climbed into the dual-control aircraft alongside Captain Williams. The pre-flight inspection had gone smoothly, and weather conditions were perfect for advanced maneuvers. As they reached cruising altitude, Williams began setting up the emergency scenario that would test Rachel's crisis management skills. Then, everything went wrong. The aircraft's control system malfunctioned mid-flight, sending them into an uncontrolled descent. Warning alarms screamed through the cockpit as Williams froze at the controls, his hands shaking violently. The smell of alcohol on his breath hit Rachel like a physical blow. He was drunk. During a training flight, with her life in his hands. "Sir, I need you to release the controls," Rachel said, her voice deadly calm despite the ground rushing toward them at terrifying speed. Williams was hyperventilating, completely paralyzed by panic and intoxication. Without waiting for permission, Rachel took control. Her hands moved across the instruments with surgical precision, stabilizing the aircraft and executing a textbook emergency landing. She saved both their lives, landing safely in an empty field while Williams sobbed in the co-pilot seat. As emergency crews surrounded the aircraft, Rachel felt a strange mixture of pride and dread. She had handled her first real crisis perfectly, but something in Williams' eyes told her this victory would come at a price she couldn't yet imagine. 3 days later, Rachel received a summons to appear before the disciplinary board. Williams had filed his report, and as she read the accusations, her blood turned to ice. According to him, she had overstepped her authority, interfered with established protocols, and demonstrated dangerous emotional instability under pressure. The lies stacked upon each other like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The student, who had saved an instructor's life, was about to be destroyed by the very person she had rescued. The disciplinary hearing took place in the Academy's formal conference room, its mahogany walls lined with portraits of distinguished graduates who had gone on to become military heroes and airline captains. Rachel sat alone at a small table, facing a panel of 5 senior instructors led by Academy Director Phillips, a stern man whose reputation for maintaining institutional integrity was legendary. Captain Williams sat opposite her, his hands steady now, his story rehearsed to perfection. He spoke with the confidence of a man who knew the system would protect him, describing Rachel's alleged insubordination with devastating detail. She had, he claimed, panicked during the emergency simulation and wrestled control from him against direct orders. The student demonstrated a complete lack of respect for chain of command. Williams testified, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years' experience. In a real-world scenario, such behavior could endanger entire crews and passengers. Rachel's defense felt pathetic in comparison. She had no recording of the flight, no witnesses except the man accusing her, and no allies in the room. Her academic Achievement suddenly seemed meaningless against the weight of institutional politics. "I saved our lives," she said quietly, her voice barely audible in the formal chamber. Captain Williams was. He wasn't able to handle the emergency. Director Phillips leaned forward, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. "Miss Morgan, are you suggesting that a senior flight instructor with impeccable service records was somehow incapacitated during a routine training exercise?" The way he phrased the question made her sound paranoid, even delusional. Rachel's heart sank as she realized the fix was in. This wasn't a hearing, it was a burial. 2 days before her final examination, the verdict arrived in a manila envelope, slipped under her dormitory door. Rachel's hands trembled as she read the formal expulsion notice, each word hitting like a physical blow. Failed to demonstrate appropriate judgment under pressure. Violated established safety protocols. Effective immediately. No appeals process. The Academy offered her a consolation prize that felt like a cruel joke, a position as a technical support specialist. She could stay and help train the next generation of pilots, but she would never fly for them. The irony was bitter. The woman deemed unfit to be a pilot would be responsible for maintaining the systems that kept everyone else safe. Jessica found her roommate sitting on her narrow dormitory bed, staring at the termination letter with hollow eyes. "This is insane," she whispered. "Everyone knows you're the best pilot in our class. How can they—" "It doesn't matter what everyone knows," Rachel replied, her voice eerily calm. "It only matters what they can prove." That night, Rachel made a decision that would define the next 3 years of her life. She would accept the technical position, not out of gratitude, but out of strategy. If the Academy wanted to bury her, she would let them, but she would never stop watching, never stop learning, and never stop preparing for the moment when truth would finally have its day. The next morning, she moved her belongings from the cadet dormitory to a small apartment off campus. Her dreams of soaring through clouds had been grounded, but something harder and more dangerous had taken their place. Patience and the unshakable conviction that justice delayed was not justice. Denied. 3 years passed like a slow-motion nightmare. Rachel arrived at the Academy before dawn each morning, inspecting flight simulators and calibrating radar systems while her former classmates graduated and moved on to airline careers. Her desk, set in the corner of the operations room, surrounded by humming servers and blinking monitors, a technological fortress that had become both her prison and her sanctuary. The cadets saw her as just another technician, unaware that she had once dreamed of soaring beside them. Some instructors nodded politely when they passed, but most had forgotten she had ever been anything more than the quiet woman who kept their technology running flawlessly. Rachel had become a ghost, haunting the place where her dreams had died, invisible to everyone except the system she maintained with obsessive precision. She knew every circuit, every backup protocol, every emergency override in the Academy's network. Her technical expertise had grown far beyond what any pilot would ever need, but she absorbed every detail like a scholar preparing for an exam that might never come. During lunch breaks, she would sit in her car and watch new classes of eager cadets practicing their first solo flights. Each one reminded her of her own lost dreams, but something else had begun growing alongside the pain. A protective instinct toward these young pilots who trusted their lives to systems only she truly understood. Late one evening, while running routine diagnostics on the simulator network, Rachel noticed something troubling. Several emergency override protocols had been modified recently, and the changes weren't logged properly. Someone was tampering with safety systems, making subtle alterations that could prove deadly during actual emergencies. She spent the weekend tracing the modifications back to their source, working through layers of digital security like an investigator, following a paper trail. What she found made her stomach clench with familiar dread. The changes were being made by someone with senior-level access, someone who understood the systems well enough to hide their tracks from casual inspection. Captain Williams, now promoted to Assistant Director of Flight Training, had been accessing emergency protocols without authorization. The same man who had nearly killed them both through his negligence was now systematically weakening the safety measures that protected every student in the academy. Rachel printed the evidence and locked it in her desk drawer, unsure what to do with information that could destroy Williams, but might also expose her own deep knowledge of systems she wasn't supposed to access. She had learned to survive by staying invisible, but some secrets were too dangerous to keep hidden. Monday morning brought news that made her blood run cold. A senior cadet named Marcus Davidson had experienced a close call during advanced weather simulation training. The emergency systems had failed to respond properly during a critical moment, and only quick thinking by his instructor had prevented what could have been a fatal crash in real conditions. Rachel knew it wasn't coincidence. Williams' modifications had claimed their first victim, and it was only a matter of time before someone died. She had a choice to make: maintain her invisible existence or risk everything to protect people who didn't even know she existed. That afternoon, she began copying files to encrypted drives, building a case that would either vindicate her or destroy what little remained of her life at the academy. The ghost in the system was about to become very real and very dangerous. The second incident happened on a Thursday morning that started like any other. Rachel was updating weather databases when Captain Rodriguez burst through the operations room doors, his face pale with concern. The Academy's newest class of pilot candidates had encountered a catastrophic system failure during a complex formation training exercise. Marcus Davidson, the same cadet who had survived the previous close call, had panicked when multiple alarms triggered simultaneously. Instead of following emergency protocols, he had attempted an unauthorized maneuver that sent his simulator into a violent spin. Only immediate intervention from backup systems had prevented what investigators later described as certain catastrophic failure in real-world conditions. As the Academy's crisis team swarmed the facility, Rachel quietly joined the IT department's investigation unit. Her fingers danced across keyboards, extracting flight logs and system diagnostics, while others debated theories and assigned blame. She had learned to make herself useful without drawing attention, a skill that now served her well. Hours into the investigation, she found what she was looking for: an anomalous signal spike 17 seconds before the critical system intervention. Someone had accessed the emergency override protocols during the crisis, but the access log showed no instructor involvement. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she realized what she had done. While investigators focused on the primary system failure, she had quietly accessed backup controls through her administrative privileges, using 17 seconds of unauthorized intervention to prevent another tragedy. The technical black box from the incident was finally decoded late that evening. Through static and electronic interference, a voice emerged that made the entire investigation team freeze. Davidson, reduce power. Maintain heading 270. I have control of your backup systems. Senior Investigator Walsh, a gray-haired man with 30 years of aviation experience, looked around the room with confusion. Who the hell is handling backup systems? That voice isn't any of our flight instructors. Assistant Engineer David Kim glanced toward Rachel's corner workstation, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. He had been there 3 years ago when she was expelled. He remembered the quiet genius who had been destroyed for saving an instructor's life. Morgan, he said quietly, and every head in the room turned toward the woman who had become invisible through sheer necessity. Rachel remained perfectly still, but her mind raced through possible responses. She could deny everything, claimed the voice belonged to someone else, tried to disappear back into the shadows where she had hidden for 3 years. Instead, she made a choice that would change everything. Someone had to, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The room erupted in confused voices as investigators began pulling historical records, searching for any reference to Morgan in their systems. What they found sent shockwaves through the Academy's leadership structure. Deputy Director Harrison, who had been a junior instructor 3 years earlier, spoke up with a trembling voice. Rachel Morgan saved a training flight back then. Captain Williams nearly killed them both, but she took control and brought them down safely. I was in the tower that day. The investigation had just become something much larger and more dangerous than a simple equipment malfunction. They had uncovered evidence of a woman who had been quietly protecting the Academy's students for 3 years, using skills and knowledge that officially didn't exist. Chief Investigator Walsh's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Pull the records from that original incident. Every file, every report, every piece of evidence. If there's a connection between these events, I need to know about it immediately. As the team dispersed to gather evidence, David Kim approached Rachel's desk with something resembling awe in his expression. "You've been here all along, haven't you? The whole time, you've been watching over us." Rachel's response carried the weight of 3 years of silence. Someone had to. The quiet technician who had been forgotten by design was about to become impossible to ignore. The next few days brought a parade of investigators, each one uncovering another piece of a puzzle that painted the Academy's leadership in an increasingly damning light. Phone records showed mysterious calls between Academy officials following Rachel's original incident. Financial records revealed unusual bonus payments to Captain Williams in the weeks after his report had destroyed her career. Most damning of all, they found the original incident report buried in archive files, the real report, complete with witness statements that contradicted the official narrative that had been used to destroy Rachel's future. The Academy's perfect reputation was cracking, and at the center of every crack was the name Morgan. The quiet technician who had been forgotten by design was about to become the most important person in the institution's history. Rachel sat in the same conference room where she had been expelled 3 years earlier, but this time the power dynamic had shifted dramatically. Chief Investigator Walsh sat across from her, surrounded by evidence boxes and audio recording equipment, treating her not as a disgraced former cadet, but as the key witness in a case that could bring down the Academy's entire leadership structure. "Miss Morgan," Walsh began, his voice respectful in a way that felt foreign after years of invisibility. "We need you to walk us through what really happened 3 years ago." For the first time in 36 months, Rachel told her complete story. She described Williams' obvious intoxication, his panic during the emergency, and her split-second decision to take control of an aircraft that was seconds away from crashing. She spoke about the intimidation tactics used to force her silence, the coercion agreement she had been pressured to sign, and the systematic campaign to erase her from the Academy's history. As she spoke, Walsh's expression grew darker. The evidence supported every word of her testimony, but more disturbing patterns were emerging. This wasn't just about one corrupt instructor. It was about an entire system designed to protect the Academy's reputation at the expense of truth and justice. The sealed evidence room hadn't been opened in 3 years. When Walsh personally broke the security tape, the original black box from Rachel's training incident sat on the examination table like a time bomb waiting to explode. The first audio file played through speakers that hadn't heard it since the incident was buried. Through the static came Rachel's voice, impossibly calm given the circumstances. "Captain Williams, release the controls. I have the aircraft." Williams' panicked response cracked with terror. I can't see ... The instruments are spinning, ... Sir, you need to trust me. Pull back your hands and let me fly us home. The recording continued for 18 minutes of Rachel systematically working through emergency procedures, communicating with air traffic control, and gently coaching Williams through breathing exercises to prevent him from completely losing consciousness. Her voice never wavered, never showed fear, never revealed anything but absolute professional confidence. When the audio ended, Deputy Director Harrison was openly weeping. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "She saved all of us that day." But the most damning evidence was yet to come. In the file marked Administrative Actions, they found the coercion agreement to document that Rachel had been forced to sign, promising never to discuss the incident in exchange for the offered technician position. The agreement had been witnessed by 3 Academy officials, including Director Phillips himself. They all knew she was innocent, and they had destroyed her anyway. Blood test results from that day showed Williams' alcohol content at 0.14, nearly twice the legal limit for driving, let alone flying a training aircraft with a student's life in his hands. The investigation team worked through the night, piecing together a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of the Academy's leadership. Williams had connections to several board members through his military service, and his disgrace would have damaged the Academy's reputation while costing them millions in federal funding. Rachel had been the perfect scapegoat, brilliant enough to be threatening, but powerless enough to be silenced. The truth was breathtaking in its cruelty, and it was about to destroy everyone who had participated in burying it. When Director Phillips was finally confronted with the evidence, his carefully constructed facade crumbled like a dam bursting under impossible pressure. The man who had built his career on institutional integrity sat in the same conference room where he had orchestrated Rachel's destruction, surrounded by the proof of his corruption. She was too good, he admitted during recorded testimony, his voice hollow with defeat. The board felt that someone with her capabilities would be difficult to control. They wanted pilots who followed orders, not ones who thought for themselves. The truth was breathtaking in its cruelty. Rachel hadn't been rejected for lacking judgment. She had been rejected for having too much of it. Her ability to think independently, to act decisively in crisis situations, had been seen as a threat to the Academy's rigid hierarchy. Meanwhile, Captain Williams had been quietly transferred to a desk job at Academy headquarters after his incident. His pension remained intact, his reputation protected, and his alcoholism swept under the rug of institutional secrecy. He had never flown again, but he had also never faced consequences for nearly killing himself and a promising young pilot through his negligence and addiction. The media storm that followed was unlike anything in the Academy's 90-year history. Rachel found herself at the center of a national conversation about institutional corruption, gender discrimination, and the price of speaking truth to power. Reporters called constantly, demanding interviews and exclusive access to the woman who had been hidden in plain sight. Academy officials, who had ignored her for 3 years, suddenly wanted to schedule meetings and discuss her future opportunities. The board of directors, facing congressional inquiries and federal investigations, voted unanimously to reinstate Rachel to the pilot training program with full honors and a formal apology. They offered her an accelerated path to instructor certification, a substantial financial settlement, and assurances that such injustices would never occur again. Representatives from major airlines reached out with job offers that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. But the most meaningful moment came when Marcus Davidson, the cadet whose life she had saved during the recent incident, approached her after the formal inquiry concluded. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you everything. But more than that, you've shown me what real leadership looks like. Not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that serves in silence. Rachel declined the media interviews. She refused the settlement negotiations. She turned down speaking engagements from aviation conferences around the world. Instead, she made a simple choice that surprised everyone who thought they understood her. She returned to the cockpit. She had spent 3 years learning that her greatest strength wasn't her flying ability. It was her willingness to do what was right regardless of personal cost. Now she was ready to teach that lesson to a new generation of pilots who would inherit a safer, more honest aviation industry. The ghost had become flesh again, and the academy would never be the same. On her first day back in flight training, Rachel noticed the whispers following her through the academy hallways. Young cadets pointed and murmured as she passed. There. Voices carrying a mixture of awe and curiosity about the woman whose story had become legend. Is that her? The one from the black box incident? She overheard one first-year student asking another. I heard she could have been flying for major airlines by now if they hadn't destroyed her career, came the response. But she chose to come back here instead. Rachel's response to such comments was always the same. A gentle smile and a quiet redirection. What matters isn't who handled the situation, she would say. What matters is that everyone made it home safely. Her humility only increased the respect her fellow cadets felt for her. During flight simulations, they watched how she approached each challenge with methodical precision, never rushing, never showing off, always focused on safety and excellence above personal glory. She had learned something during her 3 years. In exile that couldn't be taught in any classroom. True strength came from serving others, not from seeking recognition. The lesson had cost her everything she thought she wanted, but it had given her something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that her worth wasn't determined by other people's opinions. One evening, as Rachel reviewed navigation charts in the academy library, a young woman approached her table hesitantly. Cadet Jennifer Parker had been struggling with confidence issues since joining the program, and several instructors had suggested she might be better suited for ground-based aviation careers. Miss Morgan, Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper, I wanted to thank you. Knowing that you faced rejection and found a way to keep serving, it's the reason I haven't quit. If you could wait 3 years for justice, I can work through a few bad training flights. These interactions became common as word of Rachel's return spread throughout the academy. Cadets sought her out, not for dramatic stories about her vindication, but for quiet advice about perseverance, integrity, and finding purpose even when dreams seemed impossible. She became an unofficial mentor to anyone who felt overlooked, underestimated, or unfairly judged. Her office hours were always full, her email inbox overflowing with questions from students who had found hope in her story. The academy's culture began to shift in subtle but profound ways. Instructors found themselves held to higher standards, knowing that the woman who had once been silenced was now watching and learning alongside their students. The good ones welcomed the change, while those who had thrived on arbitrary authority found themselves uncomfortable in the new environment. Captain Williams, meanwhile, had been quietly terminated from his headquarters position once the full scope of his misconduct became public. His military pension had been revoked, and he faced potential criminal charges for endangering student lives while intoxicated. The man who had destroyed Rachel's career to protect his own had lost everything she had been denied. One morning, Rachel discovered a handwritten note taped to her flight suit locker. To the silent guardian who never stopped protecting us. Thank you for showing us that real heroes don't need recognition. They just need courage. She kept the note in her flight bag, a reminder that sometimes the most important victories happen in quiet moments when no one is watching, when doing the right thing matters more than being seen doing it. The academy had tried to erase her, but instead they had created something far more powerful, a living example of integrity that would influence generations of pilots long after her own career had ended. 6 months after her reinstatement, Rachel stood before a graduating class of pilot cadets as their commencement speaker. The same auditorium where she had once been humiliated now erupted in sustained applause as she approached the podium. But her expression remained characteristically humble. She looked out at the eager faces before her, young men and women, who would soon be trusted with the lives of passengers and crew members around the world. Among them sat Jennifer Parker, who had not only completed the program but graduated in the top 10% of her class. 3 years ago, Rachel began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. I thought my career was over before it had begun. I believed that justice was something that happened to other people, in other places, at other times. I was wrong. She spoke about the importance of standing firm in your convictions, even when no one believes you. She talked about the difference between being defeated and being delayed, about the power of serving others, even when your own dreams seem impossible. There will be moments in your careers when you are rejected from places where you truly belong, she continued. This rejection won't happen because you lack ability. It will happen because your strength threatens those who profit from weakness, because your confidence makes incompetent people nervous, because your integrity makes corrupt people defensive. The audience listened in complete silence, understanding that they were receiving wisdom earned through genuine suffering and ultimate triumph. When those moments come, and they will come, remember that truth can be buried, but it cannot be destroyed forever. Keep serving, keep growing, keep preparing for the moment when your vindication arrives, because it will arrive. Director Phillips had been replaced by a reform-minded administrator who made transparency and accountability the Academy's new watchwords. The culture that had enabled Rachel's persecution was being systematically dismantled, replaced by policies that protected whistleblowers and encouraged independent thinking. After the ceremony, Rachel received a message that brought tears to her eyes. Marcus Davidson, now a commercial airline pilot, had written to tell her that his airline was implementing new safety protocols based on lessons learned from her case. Her suffering had literally made commercial aviation safer for millions of passengers. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The National Aviation Safety Board had established the Rachel Morgan Award for Ethical Leadership in Aviation, to be given annually to individuals who demonstrated extraordinary moral courage in the face of institutional pressure. The first recipient was Jennifer Parker, who had reported safety violations by a senior instructor despite knowing it might damage her career prospects. She accepted the award with words that echoed her mentor's influence. Real leadership isn't about being seen doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Rachel kept a low profile during the award ceremony, sitting in the back row and applauding quietly as her former student received recognition for the courage she had learned by example. This was how change really happened, not through grand gestures or media attention, but through one person inspiring another to stand for truth, regardless of personal cost. Years later, when aviation historians wrote about the transformation of American flight training in the early 21st century, they would trace it back to a single moment. The day a black box finally spoke the truth that had been silenced for 3 years. Rachel Morgan's story became required reading at aviation academies across the country, but not as a tale of personal triumph. It was taught as a reminder that sometimes you must accept being underestimated while you build strength in the shadows. Sometimes you must watch others receive opportunities that should have been yours while you perfect skills they cannot match. And sometimes you must save people who will never know your name. But one day, like a black box recovered from wreckage, your truth will speak for itself. The voice that was silenced will become impossible to ignore, And those who tried to bury you will discover they were actually planting seeds. The sky remembers every pilot who was meant to soar, and justice, though delayed, is never truly denied. As Rachel often told her students in the years that followed, the black box never lies. It waits patiently in the wreckage until someone has the courage to listen to what it has to say. Be that person. Be the one who speaks truth, especially when no one wants to hear it. Her legacy wasn't written in the sky she had always dreamed of conquering. It was written in the hearts of every pilot who learned that real strength comes not from avoiding the crash, but from ensuring that the truth survives to protect others. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.